Good morning, it's me. I'm all set for later on doing trunk or treat with next door with Noah's Ark with our kids at Noah's Ark. But yes, it's me. Surprise, surprise, right? PB being silly. PB being silly is, well, I guess, a regular thing. It's nothing to be too surprised or shocked by. But good morning, my friends, and welcome to another day of another edition, another episode of PB Reads the Bible. And I'm PB, Pastor Brian, pastor here at Christ United Methodist Church. And good to be with you once again. As we finish up, this is episode 13, we finish up our study on the book of Daniel today. We're going to wrap that up and end it this morning. And it's really not a very long chapter. And really not a whole lot necessarily to say, but probably some stuff to say, and just some final comments on it. And yeah, you know what? We will have PB Reads the Bible next week. I'm going to find something that's kind of small. I'm actually thinking about doing Ruth, doing the book of Ruth. It's a 4-chapter book, so it would kind of be perfect. We do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and be done, and then we'll have that week off, that week break while I have my vacation. Oh, good morning, Pat. The kids will love it. I certainly hope so. Some of the kids were looking at me and joking with me this morning as I was walking in wearing full costume. I think we have somewhere around 10, like 8, 9, 10 people showing up today with their vehicles to give candy, to participate with trunk or treat. So wonderful, and I'm so thankful to this congregation for being willing to do stuff like that and participate and reach out to our kids next door and just to have a little fun. So I know I'll see a couple of you maybe later today. Anyway, though, so go ahead and check in. I see a couple more are doing that. Good morning, Cheryl, and good morning, Marilyn. Good to see both of you this morning as well. And I know some others will be probably watching later on, watching the recordings later today or tomorrow or some other day. I know Brother Ron got started. He finally had enough strength to make it through a whole episode of listening to me talking without falling asleep. So that's good. It's good to hear. Hopefully you've been, if you've been using your GPS guides, I do pray that those have been beneficial. I heard from a couple people that yes, thank you. Wonderful. Beyond that, of course, today's day is Thursday, and today's question for contemplation, if you don't have the GPS, is did I disobey God in anything? Did I disobey God in anything is the question today. And there's reading from Deuteronomy, a reading from Acts to go along with that. So just in case you don't have your GPS, it's Deuteronomy 5, 32 and 33. And then from Acts, it's chapter 5, verses 27 to 32. But I encourage you to look, when we're done, scroll down through here to find the GPS for the week. You can print it out or you just use it digitally as you finish up. There's only a couple more days left in the week, obviously today, tomorrow, and Saturday, and then we'll have a new one starting Sunday. So good morning, Cindy and John. Good to have you folks live this morning. Cup of coffee. I could use a cup of coffee. But good to be with you. I only had one this morning. I went out of the house with only one cup of coffee. Anyway, I don't even have my gift card. Somebody gave me a coffee gift card, Dunkin' coffee gift card. I don't have it with me. We'll manage. Anyway, that's not what we're here for, right? That's not what we're here for. We're here to finish up Daniel, to look at chapter 12 of Daniel. Oh, one last thing would be, of course, worship on Sunday. Join us for worship, 8:15 or 10:45 in person. 10:45 will also be live streamed. So if you can't be here in person, you can join us that way as we start week 2 on our series with the 21 questions. And this week's question is, the Sunday's question will be, am I proud? am I proud? So that's what we'll be unpacking on Sunday as we begin our second week of devotionals and questions 8 through 14. So chapter 12, again, just to set the stage, to remind us where we were. Chapter 11 ended, so chapter 11, the author of this was writing somewhere around 160-ish BC. We can actually narrow it down even closer, to 164, I believe it is. Hang on one sec. Somebody just asked me, how can you figure out when the person is, when it was being written, when it was written? That's an excellent question. It's an excellent question, and it's actually kind of a long answer to that question. There's a long answer to that question. Yeah, 164, about 164 BC. Couple different things that they use to identify the dates, how we can know. One is language, the use of language. Language does change with time. Language does change with time. And certain words or phrases, expressions, idioms, whatever, don't exist prior to a certain time. So let's say somebody coins a new word or a new expression this year, 2021, probably something to do with technology and social life and all that kind of stuff. Okay. We can even use the term social media or social media platform. What's your social media platform? What platform do you use? Well, that expression would only be used within the last 10 years. So if someone is using that expression, if you're reading a book, you're reading a story, and someone uses that term, that expression, you're going to know that it had to have been written since 2010. It couldn't have been written in 1910 because the word wasn't in existence. The expression wasn't in existence. And we still do make up words. Every year there are new words added to the English language and added to other languages. And if any of those words appear in a document that you're reading, we know that document had to have been written this year. Couldn't have been written last year. The word didn't exist. So when you're going through Daniel and words are showing up that are stolen from other languages and weren't in existence prior to 170 BC, well, then you know that it couldn't have been written before 170 BC. Okay, so that's one way. The other way is going by the content of the story, where the inaccuracies begin to take place and really drive home. Writing a prophecy about the future, the past is easy. Writing a prophecy about the future is impossible. Even Jesus says we don't know the time or day and all that kind of stuff. So can't tell the future, you can only tell the past. However, you can foretell, so to speak, you can prophesy about the present and have an idea of some things that might be coming down the line. But to have actual prophecy and predictions, so where those predictions go wrong, we know must be in the author's future. So for instance, in chapter 11, the author is nailing all these things that occurred between 550 BCE all the way up to 165-ish BCE. However, he gets things wrong right there towards the end. This idea of this last great battle between the king of the north and the king of the south had never happened. So, but since we know who he's talking about, we know that Antiochus must be still alive at the time that the author is doing it. He doesn't know that Antiochus dies, or where or how. He says he dies underneath his palatial tents between the sea and the holy mountain, right? And the sea and the beautiful holy mountain. So he's describing, I guess I would say, somewhere between the Mediterranean Sea and Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the holy mountain is Jerusalem. So he's saying that he's got this battle taking place, which that would be in the West. That would be in the West. And that never occurred. And he says that that's where he died, and he died all alone with no one to help him. Antiochus IV Epiphanes died in 163 BCE, and he died in Babylon, which is way off to the east, not the west. So since the author doesn't know that, he must have written this before 163. So the estimates, the historians and biblical scholars say sometime in the spring of 164 BCE is the best way to date when at least this section of Daniel was written and compiled and put together. Okay. We're going to get to a couple of spots here towards the end where things are added on. Daniel itself, like the original Daniel, probably ended before this one did, before our current edition of it. There are two things that seem to be added on to try to correct things, but are still wrong. So let's read it now, shall we? According to the author, and this great king from the north has now died all alone. At that time, and so now he's continuing to predict the future. At that time, Michael, the great prince, the protector of your people, shall arise. There shall be a time of anguish such as never occurred since nations first came into existence. But at that time, your people shall be delivered. Everyone who is found written in the book. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, keep the words secret and the book sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be running back and forth, and evil shall increase. Then I, Daniel, looked, and two others appeared, one standing on this bank of the stream and one on the other. One of them said to the man clothed in linen who was upstream, "How long shall it be until the end of these wonders?" The man clothed in linen who was upstream raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and I heard him swear by the one who lives forever that it would be for a time, 2 times, and half a time, and that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be accomplished. I heard, but could not understand. So I said, "My Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things?" He said, "Go your way, Daniel, for the words are to remain secret and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be purified, cleansed, and refined, but the wicked shall continue to act wickedly. None of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. From the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away and the abomination that desolates is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Happy are those who persevere and attain the 1,335 days. But you go your way and rest. You shall rise for your reward at the end of the days." End of chapter 12, end of the book of Daniel. Whew. All right. So we got some more stuff going on. Hang on, I got a text. I want to just check it out. Oh, gee, thanks, Cindy. Oh, I love it. Cute, funny. Funny. That's not a drinkable coffee, though. If you saw my joke this morning, the IHOP server asked, "How do you take your coffee?" Seriously, very seriously. Anyway, so this chapter as so much of the book of Daniel, can be very confusing. The Hebrew is obscure in a couple places, and in Hebrew makes even less sense than it does in English, if possible. And things can be translated in a couple of different ways. For instance, and this is probably the biggest one, verse 4 in the NRSV, the second half of verse 4, the ending, so 4b. In NRSV says, many shall be running back and forth, and evil shall increase. And evil shall increase. In the NIV, it's translated, many will go here and there to increase knowledge. So weird. Both technically are accurate. Both technically are accurate. That's the problem. So what was the author of this section trying to say? If most translators and most scholars think that the idea of knowledge does have a part to play in it, even though the NRSV really doesn't give any clue about knowledge. It really only says, it says about that evil shall increase, although that's literally and technically okay to translate it that way, but it's also literally and accurate to translate it as knowledge. And if we consider that knowledge is in there, that is hinted at or is meant to be in there in some way, then perhaps the author was saying that regardless of all of the anguish, all of the bad stuff that's happening in verse 12, I'm sorry, chapter 12, verse 1, in verse 1 about, there shall be a time of anguish such as never occurred since nations first came into existence. So if we're talking about this horrible time, and that regardless of how bad things are, God will still provide for the opportunity of knowledge, and will provide for some, at least, to have wisdom and some understanding, not for predictions, but to kind of see what's going on and to watch the flow of history and know that God is still there, moving through history, and that ultimately God is still in control, not controlling everything that takes place. Let's not go there. But that ultimately God is in control. Nothing can happen without God's approval or allowing it to happen. And that ultimately God will be victorious. And so that knowledge will always be around. That knowledge, that wisdom will always be around. Okay. That seems to be the common understanding of that passage. However, before we get to verse 4, we should, or now that we've done verse 4, let's back up a little bit to verses 2 and 3. Because right here, we have the very first and only real, fully undisputable statement of resurrection in the Old Testament. And not only resurrection, but what is referred to as a double resurrection. Because not only are they raised to life, they are then raised to everlasting life, and others are raised to everlasting contempt. Daniel doesn't unpack, the author Daniel does not unpack this passage at all. He just throws this statement out there, this super powerful, super important, mind-blowing, theologically earth-shaking and shattering statement that has never been spoken in Hebrew literature before. It's nowhere else in the Hebrew Bible. This is it, period. We point to some things and say here, and no. Some people will point to a point in Job. I know that my Redeemer lives. It's not talking about the same thing. I'm not talking about the same thing. There's another spot in Job, actually, but it's not about resurrection. People say, what about Ezekiel in the valley of the dry bones? That's not talking about resurrection. That's talking about the people of Israel, the nation of Israel, being quote unquote brought back to life following disastrous things. This is entirely different than any of those things. This is the first statement about resurrection. So it's confusing because it's not fully fleshed out. This tells us that this idea of resurrection is now starting in around 164 BCE, is now starting to come into Hebrew theology. So somewhere in this intertestamental period, 164 BCE through quote unquote 0, or 180 through 33 AD, the idea of resurrection is at least starting to come into play. Perhaps understanding now that it was a theory that was, it's a thought, a theological thought that had only been around for 160, 180 years. Perhaps it's easier to understand now why there was those groups in Jesus's time, and the gospel authors even say, the Sadducees, who don't believe in the resurrection. Well, they've only had a couple hundred years to think about it. It's not like it's always been part of Hebrew thought. It wasn't. It's starting to come in here. So it's very thin, it's very vague, it's very early stages. Now, the author does say about them being raised to life or being raised to everlasting contempt, shame and everlasting contempt, as a matter of fact. We have no idea really what the author was talking about there. What is that? Because it is not the idea of hell, an eternal punishment is not there. So if any literalists and anybody that believes in a physical place called hell, where permanent punishment, eternal punishment reigns and lasts, don't point to this spot, because that's not what he's talking about. That's definitely not what he's talking about. He's talking about something else, but nobody really knows what it is. What is this eternal contempt? Eternal contempt. He goes on to say, those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky. NIV says shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Now, some people read this very literally. There are literalists and people that are called dispensationalists that say that the righteous are raised and literally become like stars. We should remember a couple things about scientific understanding of the time and stuff like that. The word that's there is used, sky, that we usually translate sky, can also be translated as firmament. We don't use that word anymore, firmament. Usually we say sky, but firmament would be a physical fixed thing, because that's their scientific understanding. The sky isn't open to outer space, something that you can travel through. You can only go so far and you hit this dome, and the stars are fixed objects in that sky and just rotate over a flat piece of ground too, by the way. So don't get me. So the author, when you're reading it literally and with that understanding, it almost sounds like the righteous are raised, and especially the wise ones, which would be Daniel, the author of Daniel, as well as that Hasidim that he's writing to, will be raised and become like angels, like stars fixed in the sky, and that their loved ones will be able to see them. So that's literal. That's literal, which we don't believe that. We know that that's not going to happen, because we know how the stars, we know so much more about the universe and about sky and space and stars are real things, not angels. Not that angels aren't real things, don't get me wrong. But we don't, and we do not become angels. This almost sounds that way too. It says we become, although really it says become, shine like angels, right? Or somewhere in there. we do not become angels when we die. I've heard people say, oh, God needed another angel. That's why this person died. No, multiple no's actually on that one. We do not become angels. Angels are entirely different beings. Those are heavenly beings, which we are not, and we do not become. We do not become. So anyway, oh, the other thing is, how do we know? How else do we know this is wrong? Michael never showed up. The angel, prince of the prince of Israel, the angel for Israel, Israel's guardian angel, doesn't show up as part of this battle. It hasn't, or anything following the death of Antiochus. So now we get into the time. When is this going to take place? And the unnamed angel who is hovering over the river somewhere upstream from these other two angels says there will be a time, 2 times, and half a time. So 3.5 years. 3.5 years. Well, no. Of course, it depends on what you're talking about. What you're talking about. Are you talking about this absolute complete end? Obviously, it didn't happen within 3.5 years of when this was written down. But even when he's talking about, when he says, many shall be pure, as far as the regular burnt offering is taken away and the abomination that desolates is set up. So we would say the beginning, not quite the beginning of Antiochus's reign, but when Antiochus began the pogrom, I believe they call it, this pushing down of Judaism and not allowing the burnt offerings and setting up that false idol in the temple and all that stuff. It was a little bit more than what this time was. This time doesn't seem to be matching up with that, but that's not the point of the author. Because now we get 2 other dates, which are actually slightly longer each time. Happy are those who persevere and attain the 1,335 days, 1335, which is slightly more than 3.5 years. It's like 3 years and 7 months or something like that. But then it goes on. Oh, I'm sorry, that was the last one. 1,290 days, which is like 3 years, 7 months. Happy are those who persevere and attain the 1,335 days, which is 3 years and 8 months, give or take a couple of days or a week or whatever. So someone seems to be coming along and making edits to quote unquote correct the timing, but they're still off. They're still off. Because why? Because you really can't predict the future. And that wasn't the point of the story. It's all the other stuff that's important in there. So my friends, that's it for Daniel. As you, I pray that this whole thing has been beneficial to you, and especially today, or including today, that God has spoken to you in some way. We will do a short one next week. Okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'm thinking about Ruth. Ruth is a 4-chapter book, so that fits perfectly. Jonah, though, is also a 4-chapter book, so might go with Jonah. Although I know a couple of you did a Bible study with me in Jonah a couple of years ago. I think it was just after the pandemic, just after the shutdown. So that would have been in like April or May of 2020. So maybe we can go back to Jonah, but I think we'll do Ruth. Anyway, it'll be a short one that we can finish up next week, and then you'll have the week off. Now, as you go about your days, my friends, keep your eyes and ears, physical and spiritual and minion-like, open to what God is doing in your lives and in the lives of people around you as you see it. And as you hear it, say, "Thank you, Papa," and then tell somebody about it so that we can all rejoice and all be more intentional in looking for those things ourselves. Until we meet again, my friends, be blessed. Be blessed.